let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself right now. When you look in the mirror in the morning, not just at your face, but into your own eyes, do you see a man who is still becoming something? Or do you see a man who has quietly given up, one small surrender at a time, without even realizing it? Because here is what nobody tells men over 50. Nobody sits you down and says, hey, the game is not over. In fact, the most important chapter of your life has not even started yet. Nobody tells you that the version of you that history will remember, the version your children will talk about, the version your grandchildren will hold up as an example, that version is still being built right now, today, in the choices you make before you even get out of bed in the morning. And here is the thing that might shake you a little. There was a man who lived more than 300 years ago, a man who was rejected by his community, lived in poverty, and never had the wealth or the power that most people chase. And yet, when he died, the greatest thinkers in the world wept, because he had figured something out that most men never do. He had figured out how the mind, when it is properly disciplined, becomes the most powerful force a human being can ever possess. His name was Baruch Spinoza, and what he discovered, I am going to give it to you today, in plain language, in a way that is going to change how you see the rest of your life. Stay with me, because what is coming in the next hour will be unlike anything you have heard before. There is a quiet tragedy happening in homes all over the world. It does not make the news. It does not get talked about at dinner tables. But it is real, and it is devastating. A man turns 50 or 60 or 70, and somewhere along the way, he stops. Not physically. Physically, he is still moving, still breathing, still showing up, but something inside goes dark. The fire that used to burn in his chest, that hunger to build and grow and become, it dims. And slowly, almost invisibly, he begins to shrink. He stops dreaming. He stops chaining himself. He starts living for comfort instead of meaning. He watches more television than he reads books. He stops calling friends. He lets his body go. He becomes reactive instead of intentional. And one day, not with any dramatic announcement, but with a quiet, terrible surrender, he becomes a ghost of the man he could have been. I am not saying this to be harsh. I am saying it because I have seen it. I have watched strong men become hollow men. I've sat across from fathers who had everything they needed to finish their lives with power and dignity, and they wasted it chasing numbness instead of growth. And the worst part, they did not even know it was happening. But here is what I also know. I have seen the other side. I have seen the other side. I have seen men in their 60s with the energy and vision of men in their 30s. I have seen men in their 70s rebuilding broken relationships with the patience of saints. I have seen men in their 80s who look you in the eye and you instantly feel the weight of their wisdom, the gravity of a life fully lived. And those men, without exception, had something in common. They had mental discipline. Not just willpower, not just grit. Real, philosophical, deeply rooted mental discipline. And that is exactly what we are going to build today, together. By the end of this conversation, you're going to have a complete framework, every mental discipline a man needs after 50, drawn from one of the greatest minds in human history. I promise you this. If you watch this video to the very end, and you take even 3 of these principles seriously, your life will look different 6 months from now. Not because I have magic answers, but because Spinoza figured out the truth about human nature, and the truth, once you truly see it, changes everything. So who was Baruch Spinoza, and why should you care about a Dutch philosopher who has been dead since 1677? Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a young man. He grows up in a tight-knit religious community in Amsterdam in the 1600s. His family is well respected. He is brilliant. Everyone can see it. But as he grows older and starts thinking for himself, asking the kinds of questions that make comfortable people uncomfortable, his community turns on him. They excommunicate him. They curse his name in public. They tell people not to speak to him, not to live near him, not to read what he writes. He is 23 years old. He has lost his family, his community, his entire social world. Most men would collapse under that weight. Most men would chase acceptance. Most men would become bitter, resentful, angry at the world. Baruch Spinoza did none of that. Instead, he sat down, quietly, in a simple room, and he began to think. He started grinding lenses for a living, literal optical lenses, because it gave him the solitude he needed to think. He lived simply. He turned down a prestigious professorship at a top university because he knew that money and status would distract him from the only thing that mattered, understanding reality as clearly as possible and understanding how human beings can live with real freedom and real peace. Now here is the heart of what Spinoza believed, and I want you to hear this carefully. Spinoza believed that most human beings are not truly free. They think they are free, but they are not. They are slaves, slaves to their emotions, slaves to their fears, slaves to their desires, slaves to what other people think of them. And the tragedy, he said, is that these people suffer endlessly because they keep chasing things that cannot actually give them peace. They chase money, hoping it will give them security. They chase pleasure, hoping it will fill the emptiness. They chase approval, hoping it will give them a sense of worth. And none of it works. But here is where Spinoza gets brilliant, and here is where his philosophy becomes more than just interesting. It becomes practical and personal. Spinoza said that freedom, real freedom, the kind that actually feels like freedom, comes from understanding. When you truly understand why you feel what you feel, why you want what you want, why you react the way you react, when you understand the true nature of things, you stop being controlled by them. You become, in his words, the cause of yourself, not shaped entirely by forces outside you, not blown around by every emotional wind, but a man who thinks, chooses, and acts from a place of deep clarity. Think of it this way. Imagine a river. Most people are like logs floating on that river. They go wherever the current takes them. A passive thing, moved by everything, controlled by nothing, internal. But a man with mental discipline is like a boat with a rudder. The current is still there, the water still moves, but he decides where he is going. He navigates, he steers. That is what Spinoza was teaching, how to become a man with a rudder. And now, let us take every principle that flows from his philosophy and make it deeply personal and deeply practical for you, as a man after 50. Here we go. Principle 1. Know what actually controls you. The first and foundational discipline Spinoza teaches is this. Before you can govern yourself, you have to know what is already governing you. Most men over 50 have never done this seriously. They have never sat down and asked with real honesty, what are my dominant emotions? What are the feelings that most consistently dictate my choices? Am I driven by fear of rejection? By a deep need to feel and control? By a desire to be seen as successful? By anxiety that I have not done enough? By anger I have never properly processed? There is a man I want you to think about. His name is Robert, a fictional name but a very real type of man. Robert spent 40 years working in a demanding career. He sacrificed time with his family, skipped vacations, pushed through illness, all in the name of success. When he retired at 62, everyone expected him to relax and enjoy the fruits of his labor. Instead, Robert became miserable. He was irritable, restless, purposeless. He started drinking more. His relationship with his wife deteriorated. His children began avoiding his calls. What happened to Robert? He had never taken the time to understand what was actually driving him. He had been running from anxiety his entire career. Anxiety about being seen as a failure. Anxiety that he was never quite good enough. Work gave him a way to keep that anxiety at bay. The moment work was gone, the anxiety came flooding in, and he had no tools to deal with it. The discipline here, the Spinoza discipline, is not psychological therapy in the clinical sense, though therapy can certainly help. It is philosophical self-examination. It is sitting quietly every morning and asking, what am I afraid of? What do I want? Why do I want it? And if I get it, will it actually give me what I think it will? This kind of honesty is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating in a way that almost nothing else is. Because the moment you can see the strings that have been pulling you, you can start choosing whether to let them pull you or not. The practical habit here is simple. Spend 10 minutes every morning before you pick up your phone, before you turn on the news, before you talk to anyone, just sitting in silence and asking yourself those 4 questions. What am I afraid of? What do I want today? Why do I want it? And is it actually going to give me what I think it will? Do this for 30 days. I promise you, you will discover things about yourself that will surprise you. And in that discovery, you will find the beginning of real freedom. Principle 2. The discipline of emotional strength. Now I want to talk about something that men, particularly men of older generations, were taught to handle in completely the wrong way: emotions. Here is the lie that was sold to so many men. Strength means not feeling things. Or if you feel things, you suppress them. You push them down, you ignore them, you cover them with work or alcohol or stoic silence. A real man does not cry. A real man does not show weakness. A real man keeps moving regardless of what is happening inside. This is not strength. This is a very effective way to become a bitter, isolated, emotionally crippled man who alienates everyone he loves. Spinoza understood something profound about emotions. He did not say suppress them. He said understand them. He said that an emotion you do not understand has power over you. But an emotion you fully understand, that you can see clearly, that you can name and trace back to its origin, begins to lose its grip. It does not disappear, but it no longer controls you unconsciously. Think about anger. How many men over 50 carry anger that has been building for decades? Anger at a father who was cold or cruel, anger at a boss who never valued them, anger at a marriage that went wrong, anger at a system that seemed rigged against them. And because they never processed that anger, never understood it, never examined it, it comes out sideways. It comes out as irritability toward their wife, as emotional distance from their children, as cynicism about everything, as a kind of low-grade bitterness that flavors every experience they have. Emotional strength is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel things fully, to understand them clearly, and to choose your response rather than being hijacked by your reaction. The practice here is what I call the 3-second pause. The next time you feel a strong emotion rising, anger, fear, jealousy, hurt, before you speak or act, take 3 full, slow breaths. Just 3. And in those 3 seconds, ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? Where in my body do I feel it? What is this emotion trying to tell me? That 3-second gap is where your freedom lives. In that gap, you stop being a reactive animal and start being a thoughtful human being. And over time, as you practice this every day, that gap gets wider. And your capacity for emotional strength, real strength, not suppression, grows in ways that will transform your most important relationships. Principle 3. Financial discipline after 50. Let me be direct with you here, because this is one of those areas where comfort-seeking can destroy a man's dignity in his final decades. Financial discipline after 50 is different from financial discipline at 30. At 30, you are building. At 50 and beyond, you are protecting, refining, and, if you are intentional, creating a legacy. The mistakes are costlier now. The runway is shorter, and the temptations, interestingly, are just as strong. Spinoza said something that applies perfectly here. Desire without understanding is a form of bondage. And when it comes to money, desire without discipline is exactly how men lose everything they spent decades building. I want to tell you about a man named Marcus. Marcus was a successful contractor who had built a solid business over 30 years. By his late 50s, he had a comfortable savings, a paid-off home, and a business he could have sold for a significant sum. But Marcus had never learned the habit of thoughtful financial decision-making. He was impulsive with money. He made large investments based on tips from friends. He spent lavishly when business was good and panicked when it was slow. He could not distinguish between what he needed and what he wanted, and he confused the two constantly. By 67, Marcus was working jobs he resented in a position he had never imagined himself in, because one bad investment, followed by another, had dismantled everything he had built. Here is what financial discipline after 50 actually looks like in practice. It means knowing exactly what you have, what you spend, and what you need to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life. Not approximately, exactly. Write it down. Create a simple ledger. Know your numbers the way a captain knows the coordinates of his ship. It means making no large financial decision quickly. Give yourself a mandatory waiting period. I recommend at least 2 weeks before committing to any investment or large purchase that is not absolutely essential. That pause gives your rational mind time to override your emotional impulse. It means distinguishing clearly between what gives you genuine pleasure and meaning versus what you are buying to manage anxiety or to impress others. At 50 plus, impressing others with money is a trap. The people worth impressing are never impressed by it, and it means having an honest conversation, possibly for the first time, with a qualified financial advisor who has no conflict of interest in what they recommend. Not a salesman in an advisor's suit, an actual fiduciary who is legally obligated to act in your best interest. Financial discipline is not about deprivation, it is about clarity. And clarity, as Spinoza would tell you, is the foundation of every form of real freedom. Principle 4. Physical health as a moral obligation. I want to say something that might initially feel harsh, but I promise you it comes from a place of genuine care. After 50, maintaining your physical health is not just a personal preference, it is a moral obligation. It is something you owe to the people who love you and depend on you, and it is something you owe to yourself. Here is why I frame it this way. Spinoza believed that the body and the mind are not separate things. They are two expressions of the same reality. What happens to your body affects your mind. What happens to your mind affects your body. They are woven together, and this means that a man who neglects his body is also, inevitably, neglecting his mind. His capacity for clarity, for emotional regulation, for sustained discipline, all of it diminishes when the body is broken down or ignored. I once had a conversation with a man named Gerald, a 71-year-old retired engineer. Gerald had been a brilliant man his entire life, sharp, curious, always reading, always thinking. But Gerald had also smoked for 40 years, had never exercised consistently, ate whatever was convenient, and had not seen a doctor for a physical in over a decade. He told himself that his mind was his real asset and his body was just a vehicle. By 71, Gerald's vehicle was falling apart, and it was taking his mind with it. Chronic pain affected his sleep. Poor sleep destroyed his concentration. Poor concentration meant he could no longer do the intellectual work that had given his life meaning. He was depressed, isolated, and physically diminished in ways that a few decades of different choices might have prevented. Physical health after 50 is about 3 things: movement, nourishment, and rest. Movement means making your body work every single day, not necessarily in a gym, not necessarily intensely. A 45-minute walk every day changes your body chemistry in ways that no pill can replicate. Resistance training. Lifting weights or doing bodyweight exercises 2 or 3 times a week preserves muscle mass, which naturally declines after 50, and maintains the physical strength that is deeply connected to mental resilience. And stretching or mobility work keeps your body functional and pain-free for decades longer. Nourishment means paying attention to what you put in your body with the same intention you would give to fueling a machine you deeply valued. This is not about becoming obsessive or anxious about food. It is about the basics. More whole foods, less processed junk, adequate protein to maintain your muscles, enough water to keep your brain functioning at its best, and limiting alcohol, which is one of the most insidious destroyers of mental health and physical resilience in men over 50. And rest. Do not underestimate sleep. Sleep is when your brain processes emotion, consolidates learning, repairs cellular damage, and resets your hormonal balance. Men who consistently sleep fewer than 7 hours a night are not being tough. They are systematically dismantling the very resources they need to live well. Your body is the house your mind lives in. Take care of it not just because you want to live longer, but because you want to live better, more clearly, more energetically, more fully, for every year you have left. Principle 5. Mental clarity. Learning to think again. Here is a principle that I believe is one of the most underestimated needs of men in the second half of life, and one of Spinoza's most central teachings. Mental clarity. The ability to think clearly, deeply, independently, without the noise of social media, without the constant stimulation of entertainment, without the opinions of others drowning out your own judgment. Spinoza wrote that the highest human happiness comes from the activity of the mind itself, not from receiving things from the outside world, but from the inner act of clear, disciplined thinking. He believed that a man who could genuinely understand things, who could look at a situation, a relationship, a problem, a desire, and see it clearly, without distortion, was truly wealthy in a way that external fortune could never produce. The problem for many men over 50 today is that they have lost the habit of deep thinking. They've traded it, gradually and almost without noticing, for constant consumption. News, social media, television, podcasts playing in the background during every quiet moment. We have become afraid of silence because in the silence we have to be alone with ourselves, and some of us are not sure we like who we find there. The discipline of mental clarity begins with reclaiming silence. Start small. 30 minutes a day of absolutely no input, no phone, no television, no music, just you and your thoughts. At first, this will feel uncomfortable, even slightly unbearable. That discomfort itself is important information. It tells you how dependent your mind has become on external stimulation. And as you practice sitting in that silence day after day, something remarkable begins to happen. Your thoughts start to organize themselves. Old, unresolved questions begin to surface. Creative ideas that have been buried under noise start to emerge. Alongside silence, reading, real reading, sustained and focused, not scrolling, is one of the most powerful tools for maintaining and developing mental clarity. Not just reading for information, but reading for the pleasure of encountering ideas larger than your own: history, philosophy, biography, science, literature. Pick what interests you, but pick something that challenges you to think, not just to receive. And here is a habit I want to give you specifically. Every week, take one idea, just one, that you encountered in your reading or your thinking, and write about it for 30 minutes. It does not have to be for anyone else's eyes. Just write about it in your own words. What do you think it means? Do you agree or disagree? How does it connect to your own experience? This practice of writing your thoughts, not just thinking them but committing them to paper, sharpens your mind in ways that passive reading or listening never can. A man who thinks clearly is a man who lives clearly, and a man who lives clearly commands respect from others, but more importantly, from himself. Principle 6. Purpose. The non-negotiable. I am going to say something that I believe with everything in me, and I want you to hear it deeply. A man without purpose does not age. He decays. There is a difference. Aging is natural and even dignified, the physical and temporal progression of a life well lived. Decay is something else entirely. It is the slow collapse of a man who no longer has a reason to get up and engage fully with life. Spinoza built his entire philosophy around the idea that every living thing has what he called conatus, a Latin word meaning the striving to persist in its own being. Every living thing, at its deepest level, is driven to continue, to grow, to fully become what it is. This striving is not just biological, it is also spiritual and intellectual and social. And when a man stops striving, when he loses his sense of purpose, something in him begins to die while he is still alive. The research backs this up completely. Studies consistently show that men who have a clear sense of purpose after retirement live longer, experience less cognitive decline, have better cardiovascular health, and report significantly higher levels of life satisfaction than men who do not. Purpose is not a luxury, it is medicine. So what is purpose, practically speaking, for a man over 50? It does not have to be grand. It does not have to be the kind of legacy-shaping mission that gets written about in books. For some men, purpose is mentoring young people in their trade or profession. For others, it is building something with their hands, a garden, a piece of furniture, a restoration project. For others, it is being an extraordinary grandfather. For others, it is finally writing the book, or making the music, or pursuing the craft they always set aside because life was too busy. The question is not what purpose looks the most impressive. The question is, what makes you feel genuinely alive? What activity, when you are engaged in it, makes you lose track of time? What problem in the world makes you angry enough to want to do something about it? What skill do you have that when you use it to help others fills you with quiet satisfaction? Find that, protect time for it every single day, and never let anyone, including yourself, dismiss it as unimportant. The most dangerous phrase a man over 50 can say is, "It is too late for me." It is almost never true. And even when it is partially true, even when some specific dream has genuinely passed its window, the ability to find new purpose, to create new meaning, is available to every man who is willing to look for it with honest eyes. Principle 7. The discipline of relationships. And now I want to talk about something that many men, particularly men who have spent decades in the aggressive, competitive, transactional world of careers and achievement, get deeply, profoundly, painfully wrong. Relationships. Wait, because principle number 7 is one that I believe has the power to transform the entire emotional landscape of the rest of your life, and I do not want you to skim past it. Spinoza talked at length about what he called the social nature of human beings. He said that nothing benefits a man more than other men, that human beings by nature need genuine connection to truly flourish. Not surface-level connection, not networking, not the kind of relationships that are really just transactions wearing a social mask. Genuine, honest, vulnerable, reciprocal connection. Here is the crisis. Study after study, decade after decade, shows that men, especially men over 50, are deeply, chronically lonely. They have acquaintances, they have colleagues, they have family members they see at holidays, but they do not have friends. Not real ones. Not the kind of friend you can call at 2 in the morning when everything is falling apart. Not the kind of friend who will tell you the truth when you are wrong. Not the kind of friend with whom you can be completely, uncomfortably honest. And loneliness, the science is now undeniable, kills men. Chronic loneliness is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It accelerates cognitive decline, increases the risk of heart disease and stroke, suppresses the immune system, and dramatically increases the likelihood of depression. So, why are so many men over 50 lonely, and what is the discipline that addresses it? Here is the hard truth. Many men have spent decades treating relationships as secondary to career. They have been so focused on performance and achievement that they have allowed friendships to atrophy and have taken their most important relationships for granted. And then, one day, at a retirement party, at a hospital bedside, at a kitchen table in a quiet house, the loneliness arrives like a bill that has finally come due. The discipline of relationships after 50 requires something that does not come easily to men who have been trained to be self-sufficient. It requires intentionality and vulnerability. Intentionality means you have to actively invest in relationships. You cannot wait for connection to happen to you. Call the friend you have not spoken to in too long. Invite someone to coffee or to take a walk. Join a group, a men's group, a hobby group, a faith community, a volunteer organization where real human contact happens regularly. Show up consistently, not just when it is convenient. And vulnerability means you have to allow yourself to be known, not just your accomplishments, not just your strengths, not just the polished, competent version of yourself, the uncertain version, the one that struggles, the one that is afraid sometimes. Because people can only love what they can actually see, and if you never let anyone see the real you, you will always be loved for a performance rather than for a person. Your relationships with your partner, your children, your friends, your community are not separate from your success in life. They are the measure of it. Principle 8. Handling failure with dignity. Every man over 50 has a collection of failures. Businesses that did not work out, relationships that broke down, health choices that cost him years, opportunities missed through fear or arrogance or simple inattention, moments where he was not the man he needed to be. How you carry those failures, whether you are crushed by them, whether you pretend they did not happen, or whether you have genuinely integrated them into your story, determines more about the quality of the rest of your life than almost any other single factor. Spinoza had a radical position on failure and error. He said that error is not a defect in the universe. It is a necessary part of how understanding develops. A man who has never failed has never truly been challenged. A man who has never been wrong has never truly engaged deeply with reality. And a man who cannot look honestly at his failures, cannot examine them clearly, learn from them specifically, and then release them, is a man who carries an ever-growing weight of unprocessed shame. There is a particular kind of man I want you to think about. His name, in this story, is Theodore. Theodore was 73 when I heard his story. He had been, by any external measure, enormously successful, a long career in medicine, a respected name, a beautiful home, but Theodore was haunted. He had made a decision in his 40s, during a difficult season in his marriage, that he was not proud of. He had never fully confronted it, never truly apologized for it, never genuinely made peace with it. He had buried it under achievement. And now, in his 70s, with more time and quiet than ever before, that buried thing was alive and rotting in him. It colored everything. It made him irritable and withdrawn. It kept him at arm's length from the people he loved most. The discipline of handling failure is not soft. It is one of the most demanding practices a man can undertake. It requires 3 things. First, honest acknowledgement. Not to everyone, but to yourself and, where appropriate, to the people your failure affected. Looking at what you did, without excuse and without excessive self-flagellation, with the clear, steady eyes of a man who is committed to the truth. Second, genuine repair where it is possible. If you hurt someone and they are still in your life, or even if they are accessible to you, make the effort to acknowledge it and apologize. Not for your own peace, but for theirs. And if repair is not possible, if years have passed, if someone has died, if circumstances have made direct repair impossible, then do something meaningful in the spirit of that repair. Pour that energy into the relationships you still have. Be the better man now. Third, release. This is the hardest one. After honest acknowledgement and genuine repair, you have to actually let the failure go. Not forget it. It becomes part of your story, part of your wisdom. But release the shame of it. Shame, when carried past its useful moment, becomes poison. It does not make you better, it makes you smaller. And a small man cannot do the work that the second half of your life is calling you to do. Your failures are not the end of your story. They are, if you handle them right, the making of it. Principle 9. Inner peace. The discipline of stillness. Let me paint you a picture of 2 men, both 68 years old. The first man wakes up every morning with a low, persistent hum of anxiety. He worries about money even though his finances are stable. He worries about his health, checking symptoms on the internet and catastrophizing minor aches. He worries about what people think of him. He replays old arguments, imagining better responses he could have given. He cannot sit still. He cannot be quiet. When there is nothing to distract him, the anxiety rushes in and he reaches for his phone, his remote control, another cup of coffee, anything to keep from being alone with himself. The second man wakes up and lies in bed for a few minutes before rising, simply present to the morning. He feels the quiet of the house. He notices the quality of the light. He has his worries. He is human, but they do not own him. He knows how to sit with discomfort without being destroyed by it. He has found, through years of practice, a place inside himself that is not dependent on external circumstances being exactly right. And from that place, he moves through his day with a kind of unhurried strength that people feel when they are in his presence. These 2 men made different choices about inner discipline. and the result is a completely different quality of being. Spinoza called the highest human state a kind of intellectual love, an acceptance and even embrace of reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. He said that most human suffering comes from wanting things to be different than they are, from resisting the nature of things. And he said that wisdom, real wisdom, is the capacity to see things exactly as they are, and to find within that clear seeing a deep and lasting peace. The discipline of inner peace is not passivity, it is not resignation. It is not the absence of desire or ambition. It is the practice of what I call clear acceptance, the ability to distinguish between what is in your control and what is not, and to release the energy you have been pouring into trying to change or resist the things you cannot control. The daily practice here is threefold: meditation or quiet sitting, even 10 minutes a day to train your mind to rest in the present moment rather than compulsively running into the past or the future. Journaling, to process the anxieties and worries that accumulate, and, through the act of writing, to see them more clearly and therefore fear them less. And what I call reality testing, when you notice yourself catastrophizing or worrying, ask simply, is this happening right now, or am I imagining a future that may never arrive? The vast majority of the time, you will find that what you are afraid of is not a current reality, but a story your mind is telling itself. Inner peace is the ultimate form of power. The man who is at peace inside himself is not fragile. He cannot be easily manipulated. He cannot be destabilized by insult or failure or uncertainty. He is grounded in something that no external force can take from him. And that groundedness, that quiet, steady strength, is perhaps the most attractive and commanding quality a man can possess in the second half of his life. Principle 10. The discipline of independence. There is a kind of dependence that most men do not recognize in themselves because it does not look like weakness on the surface. It looks like loyalty. It looks like responsibility. It looks like love, but it is dependence nonetheless. It is the man who cannot make a decision without his wife's permission, not because he values her input, but because he has quietly stopped trusting his own judgment. It is the man who cannot feel confident unless his children approve of his choices. It is the man whose mood rises and falls entirely based on whether the people around him are happy or unhappy. It is the man who has outsourced his sense of self to other people's opinions of him and who therefore lives in a permanent state of emotional servitude. Spinoza called this bondage, living as an effect of outside causes rather than as a cause in your own right. And he said that the most fundamental human freedom is the freedom to be, in your core identity and your core choices, the author of your own life. Independence at 50 and beyond is not selfishness. Let me be clear about that. It does not mean withdrawing from the people who need you or refusing to be influenced by others or treating your own judgment as infallible. It means having an interior life that is robust enough that you are not destroyed when people disagree with you, when people disapprove of you, when people leave you or criticize you or fail to see your value. The discipline of independence begins with opinion, specifically developing the practice of forming your own opinions before you expose them to social influence. This means reading from multiple sources and forming your own view before discussing it. It means taking time to feel what you genuinely feel about a situation before asking others what they think about it. It means being able to say calmly and without aggression, "I see it differently," and being comfortable in that difference. Independence also means maintaining personal projects and interests that belong entirely to you. Not everything in your life needs to be shared or social. A man who has his own intellectual pursuits, his own creative work, his own physical practices, who has, in other words, a full inner life, is a man who can stand alone without falling over. And paradoxically, that man is far more capable of genuine intimacy because he is giving from a place of fullness rather than needing from a place of emptiness. Principle 11. Consistency, the discipline that makes all others real. Here is the principle that separates the men who talk about changing from the men who actually do: consistency. Every principle we have talked about so far, emotional strength, mental clarity, physical health, inner peace, purpose. Every single one of them is useless without consistency. Knowing about a discipline and practicing it occasionally is like buying a gym membership and going twice a year. The equipment is available, but without showing up regularly, nothing changes. Spinoza would frame this in terms of his idea of conatus, that persistent, ongoing striving that defines a living thing. A man who strives consistently, who shows up for his own life day after day regardless of how he feels, who does the work even when motivation has evaporated. That man is aligned with the deepest nature of what it means to be alive. He is not waiting to feel inspired. He is not waiting for perfect conditions. He is simply doing, because doing, consistent, daily, intentional doing, is what produces results across a lifetime. The research on habit formation tells us that it takes between 60 and 90 days of consistent practice for a new behavior to become automatic. Not a week, not a month. 60 to 90 days. That means if you want mental clarity, you need to practice mental clarity every day for 2 to 3 months before it starts to feel natural. If you want emotional regulation, you need to practice the 3-second pause every single day, in every difficult moment, for months before it becomes second nature. The practical tool here is what I call the minimum viable habit. Instead of committing to enormous dramatic change, commit to the smallest possible version of the behavior, one that is so small you have absolutely no excuse not to do it. You want to read more? Commit to 5 pages a day. You want to meditate? Start with 3 minutes. You want to exercise? Commit to a 10-minute walk. The size of the beginning does not matter. What matters is that you begin and that you keep showing up. Consistency over time is the only proof that you are serious about becoming the man you say you want to be. And at 50 and beyond, time is exactly what you need to use with intention. Principle 12. The legacy mindset. We have arrived at what I believe is the most powerful and most profoundly Spinozan of all the disciplines we will discuss today. And I want you to stay with me here because this one is going to require something of you emotionally. The legacy mindset. Spinoza was not religious in the conventional sense, but he was deeply, passionately spiritual, in the sense that he believed in something larger than any individual human life. He believed that a fully developed human being understands himself as part of something that extends beyond his own brief existence, not just intellectually, but emotionally, practically, in the way he lives day to day. A man with a legacy mindset asks, every morning, not just, what do I want today, but what will remain after I am gone? What am I building that will outlast me? What seeds am I planting that will shade people who come after me? This is not morbid, it is the opposite of morbid. It is the most life-affirming way of thinking I know. I want to tell you about a man named Howard. Howard was a retired school teacher. By most conventional measures, he had lived a quiet, unremarkable life. No business empire, no political career, no dramatic achievements. But Howard had spent 38 years in a classroom, and in those 38 years he had poured himself into his students with a consistency and a care that was extraordinary. He knew their names, he knew their struggles. He showed up for them, year after year, with patience and curiosity and genuine belief in their potential. When Howard died at 81, the tributes came from hundreds of people, adults now in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who said that a moment with Howard, a word Howard said to them, a belief Howard expressed in them when no one else did, had changed the direction of their life. Howard had no idea in most of those moments that he was doing anything particularly significant. He was just being consistent, being present, being a man with a legacy mindset, even if he never used that phrase. You do not have to be famous to leave a legacy. You do not have to be wealthy. You do not have to have saved the world. You have to have genuinely invested yourself, your time, your wisdom, your presence, your love, in the people and the things that will carry that investment forward after you are gone. Ask yourself today, what is my legacy? Not in theory, in practice, in the actual choices you make this week, in the way you treat your grandchildren, in the knowledge you share with younger men, in the community you serve, in the character you model every single day. What are you leaving behind? That question, taken seriously and lived with daily, has the power to transform the entire character of your second half. Principle 13. The discipline of self-respect. Many men confuse self-respect with arrogance. They are not the same. Arrogance is the need to feel superior. Self-respect is the quiet certainty that you deserve to be treated with dignity by others and by yourself. Spinoza's entire philosophy can be seen as an extended meditation on what it means to be fully, genuinely human, and a fully genuine human being, by definition, has self-respect. Not contingent self-respect. Not self-respect that depends on performance or achievement or others' approval. Self-respect rooted in the knowledge that you are a conscious, thinking, striving being who is doing his best to understand and to grow. Here is where self-respect becomes a daily discipline. It means keeping the promises you make to yourself. The man who makes a commitment to himself, to wake up at a certain time, to exercise, to call his daughter, to read, to meditate, and then consistently breaks those commitments, is teaching himself, day by day, that he is not worth taking seriously. And eventually, he stops taking himself seriously. Every promise you keep to yourself is a deposit in the account of self-respect. Every promise you break is a withdrawal. And the balance in that account determines whether you walk through the world with confidence or with a quiet, corrosive sense of self-betrayal. Self-respect also means holding boundaries, not with anger, not with defensiveness, but with calm, clear communication about what you will and will not accept in your life. It means removing, or at minimum limiting, relationships that consistently drain you and diminish you. It means not tolerating treatment from others that you would not accept for someone you deeply loved. And here is the perhaps surprising part: self-respect makes you kinder. Because when you are genuinely at peace with who you are, you stop needing other people to validate you. And when you stop needing validation, you stop trying to control them, stop resenting them, stop being diminished by their flaws. You become capable of loving people freely without the undertow of need. Principle 14. The discipline of gratitude. I want to be careful here, because gratitude has become one of those words that gets thrown around so casually that it has lost some of its real power. So let me tell you what genuine, disciplined gratitude actually means in the Spinozan sense. Spinoza believed that the highest emotional state a human being can reach is what he called amor intellectualis, intellectual love. Not just warm feeling, but the active, engaged, genuine appreciation of reality as it is. The ability to look at your life, including the hard parts, including the losses and the disappointments and the limitations, and find, within all of it, something worthy of deep appreciation. This is not toxic positivity. It is not pretending that pain is not real or that loss is not devastating. It is the mature capacity to hold both, the difficulty and the gift, simultaneously, and to refuse to let the difficulty be the whole story. The practical discipline of gratitude is this: every evening before you go to sleep, name 3 things, just 3, that were genuinely good about this day, not grand things. Small things count enormously. The feel of morning coffee in your hands, a conversation that left you feeling seen, the way the light hit the trees in the afternoon, a moment of physical strength or comfort, a memory of someone you love. Do this every evening for 90 days. And I want you to pay attention to what happens, not just to your mood, though your mood will improve, but to your perception. You will begin to notice good things during the day that you previously walked past without seeing. Your attention will begin to gravitationally orient toward what is worth appreciating rather than what is worth complaining about. And that shift in attention, that reorientation of perception, changes everything. Because we do not experience reality directly. We experience the story we tell about it, and the discipline of gratitude gradually, powerfully rewrites that story. Principle 15. Courage. The final discipline, we have arrived at the final principle, and I have saved it for last, not because it is least important, but because it is the one that makes all the others possible. Courage. Not the dramatic movie version courage of running into a burning building or charging an enemy. The quieter, daily, profoundly difficult courage of choosing to live fully, honestly, and intentionally in the face of every reason not to. Spinoza's entire life was an act of courage. He could have recanted. He could have said what his community wanted to hear and lived in comfort and acceptance. Instead, he chose the harder path, the path of intellectual honesty, of genuine freedom, of saying what he truly believed, even when the cost was enormous. And in doing so, he became one of the most influential thinkers in human history. Courage for a man over 50 looks like this. It looks like having the conversation with your son that has needed to happen for 10 years, even though you are terrified of his response. It looks like starting the creative project you've been putting off since your 30s because you were afraid of being judged. It looks like seeing a doctor about the symptom you've been ignoring because you are scared of what it might mean. It looks like admitting to your partner that you need more connection, more intimacy, more genuine sharing, even though vulnerability feels foreign and dangerous after decades of emotional armor. It looks like leaving a situation, a relationship, a living arrangement, a commitment that is genuinely breaking you, even though the fear of change feels unbearable. Courage is the discipline of action in the presence of fear, not the absence of fear. Let us be clear about that. Fear is information. Fear is human. But courage is what you do with it. You feel the fear. You acknowledge it honestly. You examine it with Spinoza's clear-eyed discipline, and then you act anyway. Because you have decided, with full awareness and full intention, that the life you want to live is more important than the comfort of staying safe. A man who practices courage every day, in small things and large things, is a man who goes to his grave knowing he showed up, knowing he did not play it small out of fear, knowing he gave the second half of his life everything he had. That is a life worth living. That is the legacy worth leaving. And now I want you to pause for a moment. Put the video on pause if you need to. Close your eyes, and I want to ask you some questions that I want you to actually sit with. Not answer quickly, not dismiss, but genuinely sit with. Which of these 15 disciplines do you know in your gut that you most need right now? Not which one sounds most interesting, not which one is easiest, which one, if you really embraced it, would change the most for you. Think about the man you imagined you would become when you were young. When you were 25 or 30 and you looked ahead at the older version of yourself, what did you see? What did that man look like? How did he move through the world? What did he know? What had he built? And now ask yourself, with the honesty that only comes in quiet moments like this one, are you that man? And if not, which is the honest answer for most of us, what is actually standing between who you are now and who you always meant to become? Here is the thing that I believe with my whole heart. It is not too late. It has never been too late, right up until the last breath. The capacity to grow, to change, to choose differently, to become more fully yourself. That capacity does not have an expiration date, but it does require decision. It requires the willingness to look honestly at yourself, to acknowledge what needs to change, and to begin, today, not tomorrow, doing the work. What would your life look like 2 years from now if you took just 3 of these principles and applied them every single day? Really let yourself see it, the health, the relationships, the clarity, the peace, the sense of purpose and direction, that life is available to you. But it is on the other side of discipline, and discipline begins with a decision. What is your decision going to be? Let me tell you about 2 men. 2 fictional men, but drawn from the kinds of lives I have observed and studied and in some cases been privileged enough to walk alongside. The first man is named David. David is 63. He spent his career as a mid-level manager at a manufacturing company, and by his 50s, he had accumulated a quiet resentment toward life. He felt unseen, undervalued, not quite the success he had imagined himself becoming. When his company downsized and his position was eliminated at 61, David spiraled. He spent 8 months watching television, drinking more than he should, picking fights with his wife, and withdrawing from the world. His health deteriorated. His marriage, which had been decent if distant, began crumbling. His children worried but did not know how to help. Then something happened. His youngest daughter bought him a book, a philosophy book actually, and asked him to read it because she thought it might interest him. He almost did not. But one rainy afternoon, out of boredom more than curiosity, he started reading. And in that book, he encountered the ideas of Baruch Spinoza. He encountered the concept of bondage, living as an effect of outside circumstances, and something cracked open in him. He got honest with himself for the first time in years. He saw with painful clarity how much of his identity had been tied to a job, a title, an external measure of worth. He saw how his emotions had been running him. He saw how he had been taking his wife for granted for decades. He saw how he had stopped growing, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, years before he lost his job. And then David did something brave. He started working. Not working at a job, working on himself. He committed to walking every day. He started reading regularly. He reached out to his wife and asked with genuine humility if they could start over. He joined a men's group at his local community center. He started volunteering at a mentorship program for young men who had grown up without fathers, because he realized that was he had something real to offer. David is now 68. He is not wealthy. He does not have the career he once dreamed of. But he has a marriage that has been genuinely renewed, a relationship with his children that he describes as the best thing in his life, a body that is healthier than it was at 55, and a sense of purpose that he says he never felt during his entire career. He wakes up every morning with something to give, and that, he will tell you, is everything. Now the second man. His name is Frank. Frank was a successful entrepreneur, genuinely successful. Built a business from nothing, sold it at 58 for more money than he had ever imagined having. By every external measure, Frank arrived. He had the house, the investment portfolio, the cars, the ability to travel anywhere he wanted, whenever he wanted. And Frank was miserable. He had never developed the interior life that his external success required as a counterweight. He had no genuine friendships. He had business relationships and social acquaintances, but no one who truly knew him. His marriage had been emotionally empty for years, held together by routine and financial comfort, rather than by real connection. He had never pursued anything creative or intellectual for its own sake. He had no community, no mentorship role, no sense of contributing to anything larger than his own comfort. At 63, Frank was diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer. It was highly treatable. The doctors were confident. But the diagnosis cracked something in Frank that had been building for years. For the first time, he had to face the reality of his own mortality. And in that facing, he realized that the life he had built, impressive on the outside, was empty at its core. Frank had the resources, he had the time. What he lacked was the willingness to do the hard, unglamorous, interior work, the kind of work that does not show on a balance sheet or in a business headline. He hired coaches, went to retreats, read the right books. But whenever genuine transformation required him to be vulnerable, to acknowledge failure, to release control, he could not do it. His ego, his deep, lifelong identification with being the successful, self-made man, would not allow it. Frank died at 74, financially comfortable, genuinely alone. 2 men, similar age, very different choices about where they put their energy and what they were willing to do. 2 completely different endings. Your story is still being written. Which ending are you choosing? I want to pause here and say this directly to you. If you have made it this far into this video, you are not the kind of man who skips the hard conversations. You are the kind of man who stays, who listens, who is genuinely open to growth, and that itself tells me something important about who you are. Before we head into the final section of this video, I want to remind you that everything we have talked about today, every principle, every practice, every discipline, becomes real only when you decide it becomes real. Not when you finish the video, not when you save it to a playlist. Right now, in the decision you make in the next 10 minutes about what you will actually do differently starting today, and what is coming next. The reflection, the conclusion, the final challenge I want to give you. I think it is the most important few minutes of everything we have covered, so stay with me. Spinoza, at the end of his great work, The Ethics, wrote something that I think is one of the most beautiful and honest sentences in all of philosophy. He wrote words that carry this meaning. All things excellent are as difficult as they are rare. He was not trying to discourage anyone, he was trying to be honest. Because the men who have truly lived, who have faced themselves with courage, who have loved without armor, who have built something worthy, who have finished their lives with dignity and purpose, those men are not common. They are rare. And they are rare because what they did was genuinely difficult. But here is what I also want you to hear in that thought. The difficulty is part of the point. A life of genuine mental discipline, of real emotional strength, of sustained purpose and consistent growth. That life is hard. And it is also extraordinary. And you, at whatever age you are watching this, are capable of extraordinary. Every principle we have walked through today is a doorway. And on the other side of that doorway is a version of you that is stronger, clearer, more at peace, more connected, more purposeful, more genuinely alive than the version that woke up this morning. You do not have to walk through all the doorways at once. Start with one. Pick the principle that spoke to you most deeply today, that one that landed in your chest with that particular feeling that means you recognized something true, and commit to it. Practice it today. Practice it tomorrow. Practice it every day for the next 30 days and see what happens. What you choose to do with the time you have left. Every day you still have breath in your body and clarity in your mind. That is your answer to every question that life has been asking you. That is your legacy. That is your character. That is who you are. Spinoza chose, in the face of rejection and poverty and isolation, to pursue the life of the mind with absolute integrity. And in doing so, he became one of the most influential and respected thinkers who ever lived. He chose the harder path, and the harder path was also the more beautiful one. You have that same choice every single morning. The question is whether you will make it. My friend, we have been on a long journey together today, and I am genuinely grateful that you stayed with it. I want to leave you with one final image. Imagine yourself, 5 years from now, sitting in your favorite chair, maybe in the early morning before anyone else is awake, and you are looking out at your life with the kind of quiet satisfaction that cannot be bought or faked. Your body is stronger than it was 5 years ago because you chose discipline over comfort. Your relationships are deeper because you chose vulnerability over armor. Your mind is sharper because you chose growth over stagnation. You have a sense of purpose, real, daily, active purpose, because you chose to create it rather than waiting for it to arrive. And you carry within you a peace, not a passive peace, but the hard-won, active, Spinozan peace of a man who understands himself and his life with genuine clarity. That is the man who lives on the other side of everything we talked about today, and he is not a fantasy, he is a possibility, your possibility. Now I am going to ask you for 3 small things. First, if this video gave you something valuable, something you will actually carry with you, I want you to hit that like button. Not for me, but because it helps this conversation reach other men who need it just as much as you did today. Second, if you are not yet subscribed to this channel and you want more conversations like this one, conversations that take men seriously, that do not talk down to you, that give you philosophy and principles and practices that actually work in a real life, hit subscribe right now and make sure you do not miss what is coming next. And third, and this is the one I care about most, I want you to scroll down to the comments section right now and write one thing. Not a paragraph, not a review, just one thing. The one principle from today that you are going to take seriously starting right now. The one that, when you read it or heard it, made something in you say, yes, that is it. That is what I need. Write it down, because writing it makes it real in a way that just thinking about it does not. And I read every single comment, everyone, this community, the men who gather here to grow, to think, to become. This is not a passive audience. This is a brotherhood, and I am honored to be part of it. Spinoza believed deeply that the free man thinks not of death, but of life. The true wisdom is a meditation not on how to die, but on how to live fully, freely, and with integrity for every single day that remains. That is my final word to you today. Think about life. Think about the life you are building right now, with every choice you make. Think about the man you are becoming, not the man you were, not the man others expected you to be, but the man you are choosing to become, day by day, discipline by discipline, morning by morning. You have everything you need. Now go build something worth remembering. I will see you in the next one.